Modiin Marks. Welcome to Modiin and Beyond. Join me every Sunday between 3 and 4 on Radio Modiin as we take a look at what's happening in Modiin, Israel, and beyond. As always, it's not Sunday, it's Tuesday. I'm Modiin Marks. This is Modiin and Beyond on Radio Modiin. How I feel like we keep needing to check in with each other because we're all still going through a lot of trauma. I am very excited for today's show. My first guest is the head of operations for the International Legal Forum, Asher Stern. We are going to be speaking about one of the biggest topics at the moment, and that is UNRWA, their role in the 7/10 atrocities. Let's cross to Asher Stern, the head of operations for the International Legal Forum. Good morning, Asher.
Good morning. How are you?
Always good to chat to you. Now, UNRWA, that's the United Nations Relief Works Agency, has made headlines in recent weeks, and not the kind of headlines they like. UNRWA is a big area of focus. You know, I like to call this war the great illuminator because it really has brought up a lot to the surface, whether it's individuals who are friends of ours who maybe haven't responded. It's brought out the anti-Semites from under their rocks, and it has exposed to the world UNRWA's dealings. So let's talk a little bit about why UNRWA has been making such headlines around the world lately.
Sure. So, I mean, as you said, Rolene, the anti-Semites come out from the rocks and the world seems to suddenly learn what we've known for years. When it comes to UNRWA, UNRWA is a core part of the issue. It's ranging from everything from internal corruption to promoting educational materials in Palestinian schools that glorify terrorism, wipe Israel off the maps, and even directly supporting Hamas and other terrorist organizations. UNRWA has become an inseparable arm of Hamas. There's nothing, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. It's rotten and infested with terror, so much so that on October 7th, those horrific images that we all saw, the incidents that Israel went through, that terror, that horror, there's documented proof of UNRWA employees not only aiding and abetting the terrorists of Hamas, but taking part in these atrocities against Israel themselves. UNRWA employees taking part in terror against Israel. So we're not talking about a few rotten apples here. This entire organization is rotten to the core. I mean, it shouldn't be that complicated. When there's videos of UNRWA employees and recordings of their employees taking part in October 7th, I don't know what other evidence we need that UNRWA needs to be thoroughly dealt with and replaced and defunded, and so that they don't continue to be part of the problem.
Now, one thing that we do have at our advantage are brilliant lawyers, brilliant legal associations like yourself, and your organization, the International Legal Forum, is taking legal action against UNRWA USA for alleged financial support of UNRWA on behalf of the survivors. This is extraordinary. This is what we don't hear this every single day. There's almost the perception that the United Nations, their agencies are sacrosanct and you don't take any action against them. So why specifically UNRWA USA?
So first of all, Rolene, about UN agencies being sacrosanct, there's when someone encourages terror, when an organization supports terror, there's no such thing as being sacrosanct. We need to stand up against them. We need to go after them. It's what the ILF does. It's what all the pro-Israel and Zionists need to do. So I just wanted to add that point. Regarding UNRWA USA, UNRWA USA is a 501c3 charity in the United States. It's the largest private donor to UNRWA as a whole. Basically, they support UNRWA's work through fundraising and advocacy for UNRWA in the United States. That means that UNRWA USA knowingly, actively, and systematically basically operated a terrorist financing scheme in the United States, which is obviously in violation of federal law in the US, the federal law of material support against terrorism. Money would go from UNRWA USA to UNRWA as a whole, and then through to Hamas. Like I said, there is ample evidence of UNRWA staff being involved in the October 7th, tragedies. And through that, this puts UNRWA USA against the US laws which support terrorism. Not only that, they were supporting terrorism while claiming charitable tax donations. It's Absolutely insane. So what our lawsuit is aiming on doing, we're holding UNRWA USA accountable for their support of UNRWA and through them, their support of Hamas. UNRWA USA did this despite the fact that for the last 15 years, people have been looking and seeing and knowing the active and tactile support that UNRWA has been giving to Hamas. And yet UNRWA USA, they're okay. They kept sending money to UNRWA as a whole. And, they were fine with it. We're saying no more. We're seeking accountability through legal action. And I think it's always crucial to note and, to mention that this legal action is not a boring in air quotes or a dry legal case. We're taking action for those whose lives were destroyed on October 7th.
You're representing the survivors.
Exactly. We're representing these survivors not only against, Hamas, but those who aid and abetted Hamas, like UNRWA and UNRWA USA. On our plaintiffs, we have survivors who have fled for their lives in the waves of October 7th attacks, relatives of those who unfortunately didn't survive the massacre, displaced families whose homes were destroyed. And, one of the victims out of the many, unfortunately, is Lishai Lavi, whose husband was kidnapped by Hamas terrorists after they broke into their home in Nachal Oz. So these are real people who were affected, and we're saying we will stand up for them using the law to stand up against UNRWA USA and prevent more funding to go directly to UNRWA and therefore directly to Hamas.
And you're filing the court case in Delaware. I mean, the United States effectively has cut its funding to UNRWA. So you're filing in Delaware. The US have cut their funding. How does this affect the case? And why is Delaware so significant in this equation?
So, Roline, it's important to note that, funding hasn't been cut off. It's been frozen. But there's always the danger that the US and other countries will seek to resume that funding. We're already seeing that happening. Both Canada and Sweden have already resumed their funding of UNRWA, despite their nice statements at the beginning. So just an important note that the funding hasn't been cut off. It's not like the funding can never go back. It is frozen, and we need to make sure that it continues to be frozen and then eventually gets cut off. Now, yes, governments, the USA and others have frozen their funding, but NGOs like UNRWA USA can still provide funding through UNRWA, and those funds will continue to go through Terra. Now, as I said before, UNRWA USA is their primary non-governmental fundraising platform in the United States. So we can't allow this non-governmental platform, UNRWA USA, to, under the guise of philanthropy and altruism, all these people who assume that they're doing good, therefore provide support for terror. So we need to make sure that specifically UNRWA USA, the NGO, is held accountable, as well as, of course, UNRWA as a whole on the government level. But on the NGO level, we need to make sure that it's held accountable for the actions of Hamas through the aid that UNRWA provided on October 7th. So that's why we need to, as well as go after UNRWA USA specifically as the NGO.
Because many are looking from around the world. Humanitarian aid is a big issue, and countries are under the perception that UNRWA is the only aid organization on the ground that is able to effectively distribute aid. But we know that there are other organizations, other aid agencies that are perfectly capable of disseminating aid. I mean, I know the subject's not humanitarian aid, but to me, it also looks like there is this canard developing against Israel around the distribution of aid. That's just a thought that I wanted to share. But this is quite a landmark case. This is, as I said in the beginning, the UN, by so many around the world, have always been seen as sacrosanct, a body of great repute. I think this war has brought to the surface that they are anything but. And I think from the Secretary General right down to the very bottom, it needs a good cleaning out and an overhaul. So can we expect more lawsuits of this kind to be filed?
Arlene, you've said it perfectly right. Since October 7th, we would assume that the world would, be an outpouring of support for Israel and the Jewish people in our fight against terror. And unfortunately, we've seen the opposite. Since October 7th, we have seen so much hatred and anti-Semitism surface. It feels like, since October 7th, those that wanted to destroy us have just been emboldened by Hamas actions. Well, we're not going to let that happen. And up to now, the ILF has 5 cases, not only against UNRWA USA. We are also going after anyone who aided and abetted on October 7th, from a Bitcoin company called Beyond that provided a platform for Hamas to fundraise. So we filed against them. We filed against Hamas directly in the ICC. We are supporting a case against AP for actions of one of the photographer that worked with them. We can't just go against the perpetrators. We must also go against those that support, enable, and fund these attacks against Israelis and against civilians. So, in short, yes, we're planning on launching as many cases as necessary in order to really stand up. And really, it's important for me to end with, we're not alone. It feels like at times like this, the Jewish people in the state of Israel, when after October 7th, we have a tendency to feel like we're alone against the world, but we're not. There's organizations all around the world. The ILF has many, many partners, many individuals, both Jewish, non-Jewish, all over the world, who are willing to stand up with the Jewish people and the state of Israel and fight against this hatred, against this anti-Semitism, against this terror support. And we're going to play our role doing this and standing for our nation and our country and our people. And with our allies, we're going to show the world that this tide of hatred and anti-Semitism, it's not going to win. We're not going anywhere. State of Israel is not going anywhere. The Jewish people certainly aren't going anywhere. And now more than ever, we're willing to stand up and fight against those who want to wipe us out. So we have many, cases in the pipeline, many more to come, and we're going to show them that the Jewish people in the state of Israel aren't going anywhere, and we're going to stand up for ourselves.
I think that's the message we needed to hear today. Because I think a lot of us are feeling isolated and overwhelmed by the tsunami of hate, and war is not just fought on the battlefield; it is also fought in the legal forums, in the court of justice, and we can have a whole conversation on that as ex-South Africans, how we feel about South Africa and their legal war on behalf of Hamas. Wars are fought in the media. We're going to be speaking to David Lang from Israeli Cool Israel Advocacy after this. But your message is so important. We are not powerless. We might be small, but as the old South African tale says, you can fell an elephant with a mosquito, and we can fell that tsunami of hatred with a strategic and distinct blow. And I think you are delivering a necessary blow, not just on behalf of survivors and of victims, but on behalf of all of us as well. Thank you to the International Legal Forum. Asher Stern, Head of Operations, the International Legal Forum, fighting those cases on the vanguard of Israel's legal war against those who aid and abet terrorists.